Hi, everybody. All right, we have made it to the last day of the Wellness Challenge, which is so awesome that you guys are here watching this. I am really excited to be talking with Emily today. So Emily and I used to teach at the same yoga studio at Flow up in Arvada, Colorado, for those of you that know Flow and know our awesome current and former boss, Suzanne. So we'll give Suzanne a little shout out while we're here. And Emily has actually been not teaching yoga for the past few months because she has a sweet little baby girl who, as we were chatting for a few minutes before this, I actually got to hear her make her cute little baby noises. So if you hear those throughout the interview, you might hear that. But Emily is going to talk to you today a little bit about craniosacral therapy and also how to use essential oils. She uses essential oils in her craniosacral practice. So just a little bit more about essential oils. I know we've touched on those a bit throughout the week, but we haven't really gone into in depth about that. And I was telling you before this, Emily, like I have never had craniosacral therapy done. I think a lot of people have heard of it, but don't really know a lot about it. So I'm excited to learn from you today. And I'm going to let you share a little bit about maybe your journey and just a little bit about yourself. So let people know who you are.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And yes, you will probably hear my squawking infant in the background as we do this interview. So just know she's really excited to be here too. Yeah, so let's see. I've been a yoga teacher for over 10 years now, and part of the Flow studio for, I don't know, like 3.5, pretty soon after she opened it is when I started being a teacher there. So it's been awesome to be part of that community. And teaching yoga is is how I started really interacting with the health and wellness world initially. And it took me to eventually seeking more yoga training, which brought me to Reiki training. And that was my first experience with working more like with a massage table type of therapeutic session experience with people. And that led me eventually to finally decide I got to go to massage school because even in being a yoga teacher and over 500 hours of training, I still felt like I don't know enough about the anatomy of the body. Like, this is ridiculous. How do I get through this much training and still feel
like, yeah, I have a 500-hour certification for yoga and I still am like, what? I mean, I love anatomy and as you may have heard, I'm like a super science nerd. I love, I'm a former science teacher and I was a biology major in college and I still feel like, I mean, there's just so much to know unless you're a doctor and that's your focus. You know, I think it's so hard to know.
And even then it's hard to zoom out and think about the whole body. So I went to massage school thinking this is going to make me a massage therapist and also a better yoga teacher. And that's the context in which I stumbled upon craniosacral therapy. So I am a licensed massage therapist, but immediately after getting my license, I started pursuing more training in craniosacral therapy because I had been exposed to it during massage school, but only the little bit that a lot of people experience it a little bit and practice it. But I decided that I'm a why person and a how person. And I said to myself, I really need to know more about this. So that was 5 years ago. And since then I have tackled some of the I first went down the biomechanical track. Many people have heard of the Upledger Institute. If you even have heard of craniosacral therapy at all, that's what a lot of people have heard of. But then I discovered the biodynamic approach, which I have really gone down the rabbit hole in that approach, and am actually a registered craniosacral therapist with over 800 hours of training in different varieties, mostly within the biodynamics sense, or what's the right word I'm looking for?
Like the lens, maybe theory. Yeah.
So that's my journey. So in my private practice, I offer massage therapy sessions, Reiki sessions. I'm a Reiki master, but more and more as time has gone by, I've been focusing on craniosacral because not as many people are doing it, and it feels like a really important approach to holistic health. And So now, though I haven't been practicing the last few months because of maternity leave and also because of coronavirus, I'm really cutting back on pretty much everything else except for craniosacral therapy, and then incorporating essential oils, like you mentioned, into those sessions. So, yeah.
So cranio, brain, skull, right?
Yep.
Sacral is, our sacrum is like low back area, part of the pelvis, basically like the top part of the pelvis. So what does an actual craniosacral therapy, I can't even say that word, craniosacral therapy.
I wish they'd given it an easier name.
I know. Or CST, we can call it that. What does a session look like? So are you focusing just on those areas of the body, or tell me more about that? Because I've never actually had that work done. I've had a lot of massages, which I love, but not the craniosacral stuff.
It's a great question. So one thing I really love about it is that it is so gentle and non-invasive. A typical, like walking you through the overview of a typical session in person, at least, is that a client will be lying on a massage table, usually on their backs, although sometimes I'll have people move to one side or the other. And sometimes I could have someone face down, but mostly you're lying on your back, super comfortable. All your clothes stay on. And I encourage people to close their eyes, although they don't have to. And I move from anywhere from the feet and like around the ankles, all the way up the body to working with different parts of the skull, the face, the jaw, and really anything is fair game. The craniosacral reference is right, your head to your sacrum and down the spine, which is like a major track of the nervous system. But especially in the biodynamic approach, there are so many different layers and parts of the system that can be accessed through the work that it becomes a combination of structural and intuitive, in terms of finding where is the body holding a stress pattern or place that could find more balance and release, and really just allowing the body to guide you, or me as a practitioner, to those areas. So over the course of a whole session, it might be, and I always tell people this because some people are like, okay, well, I'm like assuming in my mind you're going to move to all these different places. And sometimes I will stay at a person's feet for like 20 minutes because from the feet, I get the view of the entire system and a lot of information, and there can be a lot of work done just staying in that one place. And I'm really sorry that she is.
No, she's so excited. She's like yeah,
yes, this is so important.
She's so cute.
So yeah, and it's hard to do over Zoom, but usually when I'm explaining this to someone in person, I'll place my hand on someone's arm to demonstrate the amount of pressure that I use in my touch is so light. It's almost like just resting my hand gently on the body or underneath, like holding someone's head from underneath. And so it's very, very different from massage therapy. I've heard people call it cranial massage before, and I always say I'm not really sure what that is because my craniosacral therapy approach is so light and there's no manipulation of the muscles. And in fact, in the biodynamic approach, there's hardly movement from my end. I'm just allowing the body to self-correct. So it's very gentle and anyone can do it. I've worked on tiny people, like from, I don't know, age, trying to think of my friend's baby, 1.5 years, maybe 2 years old. There's a lot of work that people do on infants, all the way up to adults. So it's really inclusive, which is great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I joke that like when I go to the massage, like I have a massage therapist who he's amazing and he moves some stuff around and I get out of there and feel great, but it is like a torture session for an hour. I mean, there are like F-bombs being dropped and all sorts of stuff. He'll get into like crazy places. And I have to be like in the right mindset to go and get a massage from him because I know that it's like a lot, it's painful, but I mean, it moves stuff around. So it feels good. So the thought of like going and seeing you and getting similar things worked through the body, but not having it be like an hour-long torture session. That sounds great, actually.
Yeah. And in fact, I've had people who have experienced both say that a craniosacral session, they're amazed at how different they feel when they sit up and get off the table and walk out of the office, even though they might say, I'm not even sure what you were doing, like what were you doing the whole time, and it's almost like a massage from the inside out is how a few people have described it. So
is it more like energy work then? Are you doing more, or are you actually...
Well, so
because I like to know the why and the how, like, how is this happening?
I'm like that too. And part of my curiosity about it is because I am a science nerd.
Yes, science nerds unite. Yes.
It's really appealing to me because I am trained in everything from massage therapy, which is very physical, structural, and I'm a Reiki master, which is extremely non-physical and very energetic. And to me, this practice of craniosacral is able to bridge into both of those realms. There's certainly an amount, we're all made out of different energetic connections and bonds between atoms, right? Everything is energy. We can't deny that. And yet when I'm working craniosacral therapy with a client, I am making contact with very physical structures of the body, like bones and the fluids, like the cerebrospinal fluid, for example. But also our bodies are made up of a ton of fluid. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's isn't it like 80% or something?
I've heard anywhere from like 75 to 90 is the range, but I think it depends on what you're counting as water and fluid and stuff like that. But yeah.
And then there's fascia, and then there's, if you can wrap your mind around it, then there's our energetic field. So this work it is body work. So to me, it's very physically based, and then can also interact with emotional, spiritual, and energetic realms. So to me, it's the best of both worlds. Very effective.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So how do you then use essential oils? Are you using them on different parts of the body with people? Or is it more like you have a diffuser in the room? Or talk a little more about that.
Yeah, totally. So before I go down that path, I'll say that one of the initial things that we work with in a craniosacral session is helping to regulate the nervous system of the person who is the client.
It's like the theme for the week. We've been talking about the nervous system all week.
Listen to the other videos and I keep hearing, and it's like, yes, exactly. And this is just another approach. So I think it was Justina who was talking about the gut-brain connection. I think it was something that she said really struck me as like, we all have to just find the approach that's right for us. And craniosacral therapy is one doorway into approaching holistic health and just getting the traction started and turning the wheel, right? And maybe an introduction to other modalities and an integrative approach that can be extremely beneficial and efficient and productive if you find the right practitioners for you. It's just like finding your favorite yoga teacher. We all know that, you know what I mean?
Totally.
So anyway, yes, one of the main things that I find is like kind of first things first before a lot of trauma work can happen and deep release can happen is we need to get into a space of feeling regulated in our nervous system, meaning that if we are operating consistently in a state of hypervigilance or hyperactivity, or on the other end of the spectrum, being a little bit dissociated or being in a freeze response, my job is to create safety and trust and create a relational field with my client where the nervous system itself can feel like, ooh, I can start making my way back through that wave into the place of, like, we call it the window of, oh gosh, I'm blanking.
It's like the window of time. Okay.
Yeah, like a regulating window. I'm not saying it right, so don't quote me on that, but
yeah.
Where the social nervous system is in effect and we're able to actually like respond well and come back from some kind of trigger. And so from there, we can then go into deeper layers of where has the body been holding stress and trauma, you name it, for potentially years, or even from during being in the womb or the birth process itself, to help create release and rebalance and recollect that energy to be used in a more balanced and efficient way. So now back to the essential oils. One of my favorite practices within a session is just the practice of resourcing, asking a client to think of at least one thing, person, place, memory, you name it, could be anything, that allows them to feel that sense of calm, support, peace, balance, you know, whatever words you would ascribe to feeling, just like that sense of
It's exactly what we were talking about yesterday with Samantha when she was talking about anchoring.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah. And like her, you know, you thinking of a place and creating those associations of calm,
exactly,
and recreating that sensation in the body.
Yes.
So,
and that's exactly what I have people do with resourcing is, okay, think of that resource. And I want you to notice there's a lot of somatic experiencing that goes into my work. We go right up against that line, you know, or, you know, right up beside that line. And once people are able to recognize, oh yeah, like I have something in me at all times that I can call on as a resource if I start to get pulled. That's amazing. And it's a huge thing to be able to practice even when you're off the table. So I have discovered that essential oils can be an added layer of support and become a built resource for my clients while they're with me. And then if they can, use them out in their regular lives as a way to access that anchoring or resourcing sensation, so that if they start getting pulled, like if they're in traffic and they're like getting road rage, if they've got their bottle of, I don't know, like Balance Blend, they might be able to even just like take a little whiff while they're driving or stuck in traffic. I don't want anyone to be unsafe while they're driving, and have a deep physical resourcing reaction help them come back from being pulled and come back into a space of being regulated. So that's what awesome. We were talking about beforehand, and I don't know if I'm like going into another question you would have asked me, but the sense of smell is incredibly powerful and
way underutilized.
Way underutilized.
We forget about it, and yet like people talk all the time. You know, we talk about, like, we were talking a little bit about this too with Samantha about, like, you know, walking into your grandmother's house and like the feeling that you get, and then you smell that same smell. Or like I've talked to people who are immigrants from other countries, and they talk about like certain smells, like certain spices that they used in cooking in their home country, and that brings them back to being with their family, and, you know, just different, so we can recreate these feelings and these memories in the body that are so strongly associated with smell. I think that's like, it's so underutilized.
Yes. And I like to bring awareness to the fact that certain smells can also cause the opposite and that they can pull us in a direction of feeling like, oh, wow, that really triggers a memory or an experience or something that's less desirable. And I can't remember, I think it was in one of the interviews I was listening to you have this week, someone mentioned lavender, and it's amazing. I've had at least 5 clients who are like strongly averse to lavender and have pretty negative reactions to it, not necessarily allergic, but emotional. And so, you know, it's different for everyone. And I really like to honor, okay, what is it that is gonna, you know, it's very intuitive. I think there's a whole lot of energetics to the oils and their vibration and resonance, and you know, what's going to work for someone may not work for someone else. And so there's some really cool paths to follow in that way. But when you smell an essential oil, we were talking about this before just a little bit, the actual little terpenes and molecules of the essential oils that travel through the nose and go to the olfactory bulb, they then send a chemical response to the limbic system of the brain, which is made up of a few different organs and parts of the brain. But generally speaking, the limbic system is responsible for processing memory and emotion. And so there literally is this total cause and effect response interaction between what we smell and being able to trigger memories and response and emotions to those smells. So in the context of a therapeutic session, if I have an oil or a couple oils or a blend that someone really is finding enjoyable, you know, if they're not, we've got to find something that works for them. it's literally like building muscle memory. You build a positive response to that smell, experiencing like, oh, I'm in a space that is safe. I have this safe relationship with my practitioner. I have a smell that can help me remember and bring me back to feeling a sense of, I've just thought of my resource in my physical body. And all of those things you can actually build a positive response cycle, just because of the smell of an oil or two. And it can be a very powerful layer when you are trying to work in that very careful, titrated space of going through the remembering of a stressor that may not itself know space and time, may think it's still actively happening in your body. To be able to titrate just enough into that within a space of safety, it's an incredible way to end up finding release and coming back into balance. So that's what I have found to be incredibly interesting and inspiring, and I learn more and more every single time I work with someone in terms of incorporating the oils into a practice like that.
I love that, because I mean, I worked in mental health for 5 years in the schools, and I definitely, a lot of students, when they would share with me a little bit about their experiences, they would bring up what you talked about vividly remembering certain smells and associating it with negative, with a negative experience. And then, being able to retrain the brain, not necessarily to think of that smell in a positive way, but just to have other smells to go to and to resource, and using that as a way to calm the brain down. And just as like being a new mom, we talked about this a little bit too. I think the science part of this is so cool, because you have, like you mentioned, like the limbic system, which the limbic system talks very closely with the amygdala, which we talked a little bit about the other day. The amygdala is the part of the brain that looks at all these memories and decides, oh my gosh, am I in a safe space or not? And then can turn on a fight or flight response. But the other thing that is right there is, like, as you go up excuse me, I think my daughter's now, here she comes. I was like, I hear something. She's going to come join this. But I think what's interesting is that the pituitary gland, which, releases a lot of these different hormones, is right at the top of our nasal cavity. And so, like, you as a new mom, you've probably experienced this. You pick your baby up, you smell your baby, all of a sudden your body is like, oh, the baby's near, I need to feed you. And it creates this whole hormonal cascade. And we can have similar things happen with the essential oils, where that, depending on the smell that we're smelling, it can release different hormones. And we know that things like our stress is related to things like our monthly cycle and all these other different chemicals in the brain. So let's use those chemicals for good, not evil, and, and make it like a beneficial thing.
Yeah, totally. And speaking back to the craniosacral component too, I really believe that both and together, both craniosacral and oils have the potential of tapping into the root of those stress cycles and allowing that vicious cycle that we don't even know our body is doing, like under the surface all the time, to, in a very gentle and thoughtful way, be disrupted and recalibrated. It's like, there are so many ways of just slapping a Band-Aid on the stress cycles and medicating the stress cycles, and all of that is can be pretty surface and not actually deal with the root of the problem. And I find that craniosacral really has the potential, maybe not in one session, but if you stick with it, it's slow medicine, just like yoga, that you can really discover things that have been running in the background for so long that you never even remember they happened in the first place, the event that took place. Our nervous systems are built so that, at least from the craniosacral perspective, if something has hooked us and the nervous system didn't respond in a way of being able to come back down into that regulated window, this, right? The body literally devotes energy to, in a craniosacral perspective, to protecting the rest of the body from where that hook has landed, and to keep it from affecting the rest of like our ability to function. And yet it's still there, and it's running in present time. And so the body thinks it's still happening, and it's still protecting, and it's still cycling. And so when we can discover, oh my gosh, that's not happening anymore, it's 2020 and I'm free of that, and I don't have to keep putting resources into what's running in the background, then I can be so much more free and break that vicious cycle. And I do believe too that essential oils, whether it's on their own or in the context of blending with a healing modality like craniosacral, can be really effective in helping someone go into that space of doing really deep work, and then supporting creating new patterns and habits from there. You know, it's not like you can just flip
the switch. Yeah, I knew what you were trying to say.
And say like, oh, I'm healed. You know, there's always work to be done after that. And that's what I say to clients all the time, is after a session has closed, that doesn't mean the work has finished. And for a day or two afterwards, you may feel that things are continuing to integrate and settle, and you may feel worse before you feel better, because there's a digestion process of the released material. And
we've been holding on to some of these patterns for years and years, and you can't expect to like address it in an hour-long session. I mean, it takes years and years often of unpacking of these patterns and habits and things, and our body goes to the things that have worked for it in the past to either process, whether it's trauma or grief or whatever we may be experiencing. Our body goes to that pattern in the first place, the one that it's been doing for a long time. And so to retrain it to take on these new patterns sometimes takes a while. Yes. So, and especially with everything that I think we're experiencing right now, I really believe, I mean, my reason for continuing to do this challenge this week, in spite of everything that's been going on, is because I really do truly believe that it's both and. We can't just do this external work or the internal work. We have to be doing both in conjunction with each other, because otherwise we can get re-traumatized, we can get advocacy fatigue, all these different things, that can happen if we're not taking care of ourselves. So I think we need to be doing both so that we can be showing up and hearing other people's stories and not be in this like low level of fight or flight before we even enter into a traumatic conversation or situation, So yeah. So I really appreciate all the work that you do to help people start to unpack this and create new patterns, and really just have these conversations of, what do you need to be doing to kind of, like you said, to unpack everything and then create new, healthier ways of being. I think that's so important. So
yeah. And I, again, want to just advocate for the integrative approach that, like when we start in a craniosacral context, working into the deeper layers, there's often other support that can be really valuable to have at the same time, whether it's mental health therapy or acupuncture, chiropractic work. It's all connected and it's all helpful, and it's just a matter of listening. God, that's the theme of the week for me. It's listening, and just whether it's internal or external, like you were just saying, listening and trusting and just following, even though it might not be the path you thought you'd take. Trusting the process, I suppose, and really trusting your body, because it is inherently wise and knows what it needs.
Yep. And we can always be looking inward and figuring out how to do better and how to, improve our habits and all those things. So
absolutely.
So your contact info, and you mentioned that you are now doing distance craniosacral work, right? So yeah. So for those of you that are watching this, if you are interested in talking with Emily and just learning about how to either do a distance session, how to integrate essential oils into your health and wellness routine, anything like that, you can get in touch with Emily. She is doing distance craniosacral sessions, so she could talk to you about what that looks like. Do you offer any sort of like consult calls or anything like that?
Yeah. In terms of let's see, in craniosacral, our first session is just longer because we do a pretty thorough intake, and maybe, you know, like think about what a plan would be. For essential oils on their own, I offer free wellness consults. They're usually like 20 minutes, maybe half an hour for feeling chatty. And that's just to really understand, like, what are people's top health concerns or goals, and what can I think of that would be a good place in terms of oils, which oils specifically, and maybe even some protocols in which to use them would be the most helpful, and to get them started on a journey of using essential oils. So those are free. And then we can always talk about oils during a craniosacral session too. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciate you chatting with me today.
My pleasure.
I was so excited to get to see your little one. So that was really fun too. My not so little one is still over here vying for my attention today, as always. But anyway, I appreciate you being here. For those of you that want to reach out to Emily, her info is in all of the stuff there, and you can reach out to her. And thank you all for keep continuing to show up and watch these videos. I think, as we've talked about all week, it's so important to just have a bunch of different tools in your toolbox. So that's what I do in my work, is I help provide people with different tools so that they have coping skills. It's what you're doing in your work, Emily, is providing different resources. And like we said, find something that works for you, find someone to work with that you resonate with, because we all need different people in our lives to help us grow and learn and change all these patterns. So hope you all have a great weekend, and go do something to take care of yourself and go be a good human. And Emily, thanks. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, you
Happy
guys.
Friday.
Thanks.